This is a picture of the very rare Perth County honey badger, or in Latin, Caninus horribus. If you should encounter this vicious creature in the wild, make no eye contact or sudden moves. Back away slowly to a safe distance and alert authorities as soon as possible. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning at verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. The popular Broadway play called The Book of Mormon follows the story of a young Mormon missionary in Uganda. He goes to Africa, a fervent missionary, devout, but the violence he sees makes him start to lose faith in his religion. But instead of abandoning his faith, he decides to reaffirm everything he has been taught. He sings a triumphant solo which starts reasonably enough. I believe that the Lord God created the universe, but then it gets a little shaky. I believe that ancient Jews built boats and sailed to America. I believe that God will give me my own planet one day. I believe that in 1978, God changed his mind about black people. I believe that God lives on a planet called Kolob. I believe that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri. Those beliefs sound odd to many of us. Jediism is a religion inspired by Star Wars. Jedis believe that the Force is a reality. The religion asks followers to beware of the dark side, which leads to fear, hate, and suffering. 4 years ago in Texas, the Temple of the Jedi Order received tax-exempt status. Being a Jedi sounds pretty good, but Jedi are not allowed to marry, so many of you cannot convert. The First Church of Cannabis was founded in March 2015 by Bill Levine, who attended Indianapolis Hebrew Congregation, a Reformed Judaism synagogue, as a child. As the leader and highest holy official of the First Church of Cannabis, Bill refers to himself as the Grand Poobah of the church. Membership will cost you $4.20 a month, which is tax deductible. The church was granted IRS tax-exempt status less than 30 days after he applied. Bill claimed that he had the idea to found the church while watching the popular television series The Flintstones. Grand Poobah is a term derived from the name that was used recurringly in the Flintstones as the name of the high-ranking elected position in a secret society, the Loyal Order of Water Buffaloes. The First Church of Cannabis has a list of 12 commandments called the Deity Dozen, which includes abstention from internet trolling. You can get married at the First Church of Cannabis, but of course, there's no guarantee you remember the ceremony or anything about your wedding day. Pastafarianism, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, began with the demand that Kansas schools teach students the theory of the flying spaghetti monster, along with the theory of evolution. They believe there's a relationship between pirate population and natural disasters. Members of Iglesia Maradoniana pray to Diego Maradona, the soccer legend. His fans started a religion for him in 1998. They claim more than 1 million followers in more than 60 countries. Presbyterians follow the teachings of George Carlin. Presbyterians believe that when you die, your soul goes onto the roof and stays stuck up there until someone knocks it down with a long pole, and then your new life begins. Much of what passes for religion is nuts. I grew up in Toronto, where religion is as diverse as almost any place in Canada. I had to explain to my classmates on a fairly regular basis what a Presbyterian is, because they didn't have a clue. Many of our neighbors in Toronto knew as much about Presbyterianism as they did about Pastafarianism. It's been confusing for a long, long time. First Church Corinth was not even 15 years old, yet they already had competing factions with different understandings of faith. Some Corinthians thought emotion was central to the Christian faith. They liked the experiences of worship and transcendence that give you goosebumps. They focused on the feeling side of religion, and they have spiritual airs. For some faithful Christians, the measure of faith is whether you feel happy or sad at the right times. Others in the church at Corinth felt that knowledge is the most important aspect of the Christian faith. They were interested in doctrine, scripture, and theology. They spent time deciding who was orthodox and who was not. We know thoughtful Christians who analyze everything. In addition to the feeling group and the thinking group, there was an activist wing in the Corinthian church. They thought hugging, crying, and laughing were shallow, and ecclesiology, soteriology, and eschatology were irrelevant. They believed that religion is something you do. That is, the true measure of what you believe is what you do. Faith is acting on behalf of the poor. In Corinth, there were amazing people who were so dedicated to helping others that they gave away most of their possessions. We are glad that there are still social activists in the church. So how does Paul respond to this diversity? He pushes beyond these three approaches for a fourth choice. The King James Version calls it charity. Now that is an old word nowadays, and it is used often as a punchline to a joke, one that carries negative connotations. He was a charity case, we might say. Not a good thing. Modern translations use the word love. The Greek agape is love that is patient and kind, not jealous, possessive, or touchy. Love that is the one thing that still stands when everything else has fallen. Paul says that for now our knowing is in part, and our seeing is through a glass darkly. There are so many questions to which we can only admit that we do not have the answers. Nevertheless, Paul says we know enough. We can be sure of this, that the essence of genuine Christianity is love. The absolute center of the Christian faith is accepting God's love and sharing it with others. Love encompasses us and illuminates all that we feel and think and do. For those who think of religion as an emotional experience, faith becomes a roller coaster. They can end up frustrated. Religion that is only interested in knowledge and has no concern for what we feel or do becomes very quickly cold and abstract. When we do good works apart from what we feel and think, we run out of energy and vision. The love of God makes it possible for us to feel, think, and act with love. God's love invites feelings of gratitude, challenges our minds with mystery, and offers us strength to help those who are hurting. Agape love, God's love, the love that Paul talks about, is difficult to comprehend in our world. We tend to place a value on everything. We are transactional. We have conditions. I will love you if you fulfill these certain conditions, if you behave in this way. If you don't, then the contract is null and void. And yet God's love is as free as rain. This is the scandal of grace. We have not earned God's favor. God's love is a pure gift. And all the while we keep looking for the fine print, all because we assume we have to do something in order to receive God's blessing or approval. Martin Copenhaver talks about this. He relates it to the first time he walked as a toddler. I don't remember the first time I walked, but I imagine it went something like this. I stood at one end of the room with my mother and my father a full 3 steps away. Before that day, I could probably do a kind of dangling that almost looks like walking, when somebody held me by the hands and shifted me from side to side as my feet barely touched the floor. But this is the day when I will try to walk on my own, all holds barred, with just 2 eager parents seemingly miles apart, there to cheer me on. So I set out, wobbling at first, and perhaps stumbling a little, but unmistakably making it on my own, from one set of arms to the other. And then I imagined that my father lifted me high in the air with an exultant shout, as if no one in the human history had ever walked before. Then, after numerous exclamations, I probably felt like the most loved, most wonderful boy in the whole world. After a time, I could walk with more assurance, but for some reason, I didn't receive so much praise. In fact, I can't remember the last time anyone praised me for walking across a room. So I had to do other things. Simply walking just wasn't good enough. I had to find ways to make a splash in other ways, just to get back to that feeling of being noticed, of being picked up with the light, of being valued. And in all that striving, as Martin Copenhaver puts it, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that my parents did not praise me because of my accomplishments. Rather, they praised my accomplishments because they loved me, and would have loved me if there were no accomplishments to praise. The experience of God's love is the experience of being embraced by a love that sets no parameters, conditions, asks no questions, requires nothing in return. Paul Tillich wrote, "Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, 'You are accepted. You are accepted by that which is greater than you, and the name of which you do not know. Do not seek for anything. Do not perform anything. Do not intend anything. Simply accept the fact that you are accepted. If that happens to us, we experience grace. After such an experience, we may not be better than before, and we may not believe more than before, but everything is transformed. In that moment, grace conquers sin, and reconciliation bridges the gulf of estrangement, and nothing is demanded of this experience. No religious or moral or intellectual presupposition, nothing but acceptance. A river runs through it is the story of a Presbyterian minister, the father of 2 sons. They share fly fishing and a passion for life. The older son becomes a novelist and a professor. The younger son, as his father describes him, is beautiful, but he is restless, and he cannot seem to stay out of trouble. His family tries to help him, but eventually he is murdered over a gambling debt. In a sermon he preaches near the end of his life, the father says these words: "Each one of us here today will at one time in our lives look upon a loved one who is in need and ask the question, we are willing to help, God, but what if anything is needed? Either we don't know what part of ourselves to give, or the part we have to give isn't wanted. And so it is those we live with and should know who elude us. But we can still love them. We can love them completely, without complete understanding." The heart of the Christian faith is love. Loving others, those in our family, in our church, in other churches, in no church at all, children, our own and everyone else's, our neighbors and people in other neighborhoods, people we like and those we do not, those we understand and those we do not understand. At the end of it all, at the heart of it all, it is about love. Love that never ends.